ever heard of a killer? I drop bombs like Hiroshima.
Somebody said, look at LeakYou video. What the fuck is LeakYou? Is it like a site? What's LeakYou? LeakYou. Is it a YouTube channel? Oh, shit. Oh, all right, bet. Here we go.
And communicated with this being telepathically. Okay. And this book is supposed to be based on the diary and personal notes of this nurse who is named Matilda Macleroy. It goes on to talk about how the Earth is a prisoner planet. A prisoner planet. That is, it's very strange, right? What is a prisoner planet? Well, some souls have been dumped on this Earth, on this planet, on this prison planet, for those beings who are considered criminals or those who don't conform. That their souls are trapped, almost like an electronic trap that circles the Earth, right? Very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. Not to even say that this should be even a belief that anyone should have. It's just an interesting point of view. It's fascinating stuff, interesting stuff. And I just want to kind of just jump right into it. We will go from there. I probably am just going to be listening in, and I will be taking my audio out. But we are not alone. We are not alone. And there could also, too, I think there's things that happen in the UFO paranormal world, in that phenomena, that has a lot to do with Satan as well. So keep that in mind. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Let's go.
Roswell, alien interview. The letter from Mrs. McElroy. Dear Lawrence, I'm typing this letter to you on my old Underwood typewriter that I bought after I was discharged from the Army. Somehow it seems like a fitting contrast to the subject of this letter and the documents you will find enclosed in this envelope. The last time I spoke to you was about 8 years ago. During your brief telephone interview with me, you asked me to assist you with the research for the Oz Factors book you were writing because you suspected that I might know something that would help your investigation into the possibility that extraterrestrial beings may have influenced the history of Earth. When we spoke, I told you that I did not have any information that I could share with you about anything. Since then, I have read your book and found it very interesting and compelling. You are obviously a man who has done his homework and who could understand my experiences. I've been thinking a lot about your allusion to the old philosopher whom you paraphrased in our conversation, with great power comes great responsibility. Although I didn't think power is pertinent in my life or to my reasons for sending you the enclosed documents, you certainly did get me thinking about my responsibility. I have reconsidered my position for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is my realization that you are right. I do have a responsibility to myself at least. I cannot possibly tell you all the personal hell of ethical irresolution and spiritual ambivalence I have endured since 1947. I do not want to keep playing the game of maybe I should have or maybe I shouldn't have through the rest of eternity. Many men have been killed to extinguish the possibility of revealing the knowledge I have helped to withhold from society until now. Only a small handful of people on earth have seen and heard what I have had the burden of keeping secret for 60 years. All those years I thought that I had been entrusted with a great deal of confidence by the powers that be in our government. Although I have often felt that power is greatly misguided to protect mankind from certain knowledge that not only do intelligent extraterrestrial life forms exist, but they have and continue to aggressively monitor and invade the lives of everyone on Earth every day. Therefore, I think the time has come to pass along my secret knowledge to someone I think will understand it. I don't think it would be responsible of me to take the knowledge I have into the silent afterlife beyond reach of recognition. I think there is a greater good to be served than protecting the vested interests for whom this information is considered a matter of national security, whatever that means, and therefore justification for making it top secret. Also, I am now 83 years old. I have decided to leave this body, which has outlasted its usefulness to me, using a painless method of self-administered euthanasia. I have very few months to live and nothing to fear or lose. So I have moved away from Montana, where my husband and I lived for most of our life, to spend our remaining days in a lovely rented upstairs bedroom in a house in the homeland of my husband's family in County Meath, Ireland. I will die not far from the great mound at Noth and Doth, the fairy mound of darkness. These are sacred cairns, or massive stone structures that were erected about 3700 BCE and engraved with indecipherable hieroglyphs about the same time as the pyramids or other inexplicable stone monuments were being built all over the earth. I am also not far from the hill of Tara, that was once the ancient seat of power in Ireland, where 142 kings are said to have reigned in prehistoric and historic times. In ancient Irish religion and mythology, this was the sacred place of dwelling for the gods and was the entrance to the other world. St. Patrick came to Tara to conquer the ancient religions of the pagans. He may have suppressed the religious practices in the area, but he certainly did not have any impact on the gods who brought these civilizations to Earth, as you will discover when you read the documents enclosed. Therefore, this is a fitting location for my departure from this unholy world and final release from the burdens of this life. The crystal clear perspective of hindsight has revealed a higher purpose to me, assisting the survival of the planet, all living beings and life forms in our galaxy. The status quo of our government establishment has been to protect the people from knowledge of such matters. In fact, the only protection afforded by ignorance and secrecy is to hide the private agenda of those in power to enslave others, and by doing so, to disarm every perceived enemy and ally through superstition and stupidity. Therefore, I have enclosed the original and only existing copies of my personal notes and reflections on a matter which I have kept hidden from everyone, even my own family. I have also enclosed my copies of typed transcripts created by the stenographer who transcribed all of my interviews with the alien saucer pilot after each interview was finished. I do not have any copies of the tape recordings that were made of my interview reports. No one until now knows that I was able to secretly retain copies of the official interview transcripts. Now I'm entrusting these documents to your discretion to impart to the world in any form or manner you see fit. My only request is that you do so in a way that will not threaten your life or well-being, if possible. If you were to incorporate these notes of my experiences into a work of fiction, such as a novel, the factual nature of the material could be easily dismissed or discredited by any agency for whom the national security is used as a personal shield against scrutiny and justice. In doing so, you could disavow any knowledge of their true origin and claim that it is a fictitious work of your imagination. Whoever said that truth is stranger than fiction was right as rain. For most people, all of this will be unbelievable. Unfortunately, beliefs are not a reliable criteria for reality. Also, I'm sure that if you were to show these notes to anyone that would prefer physical, economic, or spiritual slavery over freedom, the subject matter contained in them would seem quite objectionable. If you attempted to publish the documents as a matter of factual reporting in a newspaper or on the evening TV news, they would be rejected out of hand as the work of a kook. The very nature of these documents make them unbelievable and therefore discreditable. Conversely, the release of this information is potentially catastrophic for certain political, religious, and economic vested interests. These documents contain information which is quite relevant to your interest and investigations into alien encounters and paranormal experience. To use your analogy in the Oz Factors book, I can honestly say that the few factual reports that have been made by others about alien influences are only a gentle breeze in the eye of the apocalyptic hurricane swirling around Earth. There really are wizards and wicked witches and flying monkeys in this universe. This information, which has been suspected and or speculated upon by so many for so long, has been constantly denied by mainstream media, academia, and the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address. As you know, in July 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield, RAAF, issued a press release stating that personnel from the field's 509th Bomb Group had recovered a crashed flying disc from a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico, sparking intense media interest. Later that same day, the commanding general of the 8th Air Force stated that Major Jesse Marcel, who was involved with the ordinary recovery of the debris, had recovered only the tattered remnants of a weather balloon. The true facts of the incident have been suppressed by the United States government since then. You may not know that I was enlisted in the U.S. Women's Army Air Force, WAC, Medical Corps, which was a part of the U.S. Army back then. I was assigned to the 509th Bomb Group as a flight nurse at the time of the incident. When the news that there had been a crash was received at the base, I was asked to accompany Mr. Cavett, the county intelligence officer, to the crash site as the driver of his vehicle and to render any needed emergency medical assistance to any survivors if necessary. Therefore, I briefly witnessed the wreckage of an alien spacecraft as well as the remains of the several alien personnel aboard the craft who were already dead. When we arrived, I learned that one of the personnel on board the craft had survived the crash and was conscious and apparently uninjured. The conscious alien was similar in appearance but not the same as the others. None of the other personnel present could communicate with the survivor, as the being did not communicate verbally or by any recognizable signs. However, while I examined the patient for injuries, I immediately detected and understood that the alien being was attempting to communicate with me by mental images or telepathic thought, which projected directly from the mind of the being. I immediately reported this phenomenon to Mr. Cavett, as no other person present could perceive these thoughts and the alien seemed able and willing to communicate with me. It was decided after a brief consultation with a senior officer that I would accompany the surviving alien back to the base. This was partly due to the fact that I was a nurse and could attend to the physical needs of the alien, as well as serve as a non-threatening communicator and companion. After all, I was the only woman at the site and the only one who was not armed. I was thereafter assigned permanently to serve as a companion of the alien at all times. My duty was to communicate with and interview the alien and to make a complete report of all that I had discovered to command authorities. Subsequently, I was supplied with specific lists of questions provided to me by military and non-military personnel, which I was to interpret for the alien and record the responses to the questions provided. I also accompanied the alien at times during medical testing and the many other examinations to which the alien was subjected by staff from numerous government agencies. I was given a promotion in rank to Senior Master Sergeant to improve my security rating and to increase my pay grade from $54 a month to $138 per month for this very unusual assignment. I performed these duties from July 7th through August 1947, at which time the alien died or departed the body, as you will read about in my notes. Although I was never left entirely alone with the alien, as there were always military personnel, intelligence agency people, and a variety of other officials present from time to time, I did have uninterrupted access to and communication with the alien being for nearly 6 weeks. Hereinafter is an overview and summary of my personal recollections of conversations with the alien craft pilot, whom I came to know by the identity of Errol. I feel that it is my duty at this time, in the best interest of the citizens of Earth, to reveal what I have learned from my interaction with Errol during those 6 weeks, on the anniversary of her death or departure 60 years ago. Although I served as a nurse in the Army Air Force, I am not a pilot or technician. Further, I did not have any direct contact with the spacecraft or other materials recovered from the crash site at that time or thereafter. To that degree, it must be taken into consideration that my understanding of the communications I had with Errol are based on my own subjective ability to interpret the meaning of the thoughts and mental images I was able to perceive. Our communication did not consist of spoken language in the conventional sense. Indeed, the body of the alien had no mouth through which to speak. Our communication was by telepathy. At first, I could not understand Errol very clearly. I could perceive images, emotions, and impressions, but it was difficult for me to express these verbally. Once Errol learned the English language, she was able to focus her thoughts more precisely using symbols and meanings of words I could understand. Learning the English language was done as a favor to me. It was more for my own benefit than hers. By the end of our interview sessions, and increasingly since then, I have become more comfortable with telepathic communication. I have become more adept at understanding Errol's thoughts as though they are my own. Somehow, her thoughts became my thoughts. Her emotions are my emotions. However, this is limited by her willingness and intention to share her own personal universe with me. She is able to be selective about what communication I am allowed to receive from her. Likewise, her experience, training, education, relationships, and purposes are uniquely her own. This is the symbol of the domain. The domain is a race or civilization of which Errol, the alien I interviewed, is an officer, pilot, and engineer serving in the Domain Expeditionary Force. The symbol represents the origin and unlimited boundary of the known universe, united and integrated into a vast civilization under the control of the domain. Errol is currently stationed at a base in the asteroid belt, which she refers as a space station in the solar system of Earth. First and foremost, Errol is herself. Secondarily, she voluntarily serves as an officer, pilot, and engineer in the Domain Expeditionary Force. In that capacity, she has duties and responsibilities, but she is at leave to come and go as she pleases also. Please accept this material and make it known to as many people as possible. I repeat that it is not my intention to endanger your life with the possession of this material, nor do I really expect you to believe any of it either. However, I do sense that you can appreciate the value that such knowledge may have to those who are willing and able to face the reality of it. Mankind needs to know the answers to questions which are contained in these documents. Who are we? Where did we come from? What is our purpose on Earth? Is mankind alone in the universe? If there is intelligent life elsewhere, why have they not contacted us? It is vital that people understand the devastating consequences to our spiritual and physical survival if we fail to take effective action to undo the long-standing and pervasive effects of alien intervention on Earth. Perhaps the information in these documents will serve as a stepping stone to a better future for mankind. I hope that you can be more clever, creative, and courageous in the distribution of this information than I have been. May the gods bless you and keep you. Mrs. Matilda O'Donnell Macleroy, Senior Master Sergeant, Women's Army Air Force Medical Corps, retired. 100 Troytown Heights, Nevenmeath County, Meath, Ireland. Chapter 1. My first interview with the alien. Matilda O'Donnell Macleroy personal note. By the time the alien had been returned to the base, I had already spent several hours with her. As I mentioned, Mr. Cavett told me to stay with the alien since I was the only person among us who could understand her communication. I could not understand my ability to communicate with the being. I had never before that time experienced telepathic communication with anyone. The nonverbal communication I experienced was like the understanding you might have when a child or dog is trying to get you to understand something, but much, much more direct and powerful. Even though there were no words spoken or signs made, the intention of the thoughts were unmistakable to me. I realized later that although I received the thought, I did not necessarily interpret its meaning exactly. I think that the alien being was not willing to discuss technical matters due to the nature of her position as an officer and pilot with the duty to maintain the security and confidentiality required by her own unit or organization. Any soldier who is captured by the enemy in the line of duty has a responsibility to withhold vital information, even in the face of interrogation or torture, of course. But in spite of that, I have always felt that the alien being was not really trying to hide anything from me. I just never got that feeling. Her communication always seemed honest and sincere to me, but I suppose you can never know for sure. I definitely feel that I shared a unique bond with the alien. It was a kind of trust or empathy that you have with a patient or a child. I think it was because the alien could understand that I was really interested in her and had no harmful intention. Nor would I allow any harm to come to her if I could prevent it. This was true too. I refer to the alien as her. Actually, the being was not sexual in any way, either physiologically or psychologically. She did have a rather strong feminine presence and demeanor. However, in terms of psychology, the being was asexual and had no internal or external reproductive organs. Her body was more like the body of a doll or robot. There were no internal organs as the body was not constructed of biological cells. It did have a kind of circuit system or electrical nervous system that ran throughout the body, but I could not understand how it worked. In stature and appearance, the body was quite short and petite, about 40 inches tall. The head was disproportionately large relative to arms, legs, and torso, which were thin. There were 3 fingers on each of 2 hands and feet, which were somewhat prehensile. The head had no operational nose or mouth or ears. I understand that a space officer does not need these, as space has no atmosphere to conduct sound. Therefore, sound-related sensory organs are not built into the body, nor does the body need to consume food, hence the absence of a mouth. The eyes were quite large. I was never able to determine the exact degree of visual acuity of which the eyes were capable, but I observed that her sense of sight must have been extremely acute. I think the lens of the eyes, which were very dark and opaque, may have also been able to detect waves or particles beyond the visual spectrum of light. I suspect that this may have included the full range of the electromagnetic spectrum or more, but I don't know this for sure. When the being looked at me, her gaze seemed to penetrate right through me, as though she had X-ray vision. I found this a little embarrassing at first, until I realized she had no sexual intentions. In fact, I don't even think she ever even had the thought that I was male or female. It became very obvious after a short time with the being that her body did not require oxygen, food, or water, or any other external source of nutrition or energy. As I learned later, this being supplied her own energy, which animated and operated the body. It seemed a little bit eerie at first, but I got used to the idea. It's really a very simple body. There's not much to it compared to our own bodies. Errol explained to me that it was not mechanical, like a robot, nor was it biological. It is animated directly by her as a spiritual being. Technically, from a medical standpoint, I would not say that Errol's body could not be called alive. Her dull body is not a biological life form with cells and so forth. It had a smooth skin or covering which was gray in color. The body was highly tolerant to changes in temperature, atmospheric conditions, and pressure. The limbs were quite frail, without musculature. In space, there is no gravity, so very little muscle strength is needed. The body was used almost entirely on a spacecraft or in low or no gravity environments. Since Earth has a heavy gravity, the body was not able to walk around very well, as the legs were not really suited to that purpose. The feet and hands were quite flexible and agile, however. Overnight before my first interview with the alien, the area had been transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. There were 12 men working on setting up lights and camera equipment. A motion picture camera and microphone and tape recorder was there, also set up in the interview room. I don't know why a microphone was needed since there were no verbal communications possible with the alien. There was also a stenographer and several people busy typing on typewriters. I was informed that an expert foreign language interpreter and a code-breaking team had been flown to the base during the night to assist with my efforts to communicate with the alien. There were also several medical personnel, specialists in various fields, to examine the alien, and a professor of psychology was there to help formulate questions and interpret the answers. As I was just a nurse, I was not considered to be a qualified interpreter, even though I was the only one there who could understand anything the alien was thinking. There were many subsequent conversations between us. Each interview resulted in an exponential increase in the understanding between us, as I will discuss later on in my notes. This is the first transcript with the answers to a list of questions provided to me by the intelligence officer at the base, which I debriefed to the stenographer immediately following the interview. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army, Air Force Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 9th, 1947. Question, are you injured? Answer, no. Question, what medical assistance do you require? Answer, none. Question, do you need food or water or other sustenance? Answer, no. Question, do you have any special environmental needs such as air temperature, atmospheric chemical content, air pressure, or waste elimination? Answer, no, I am not a biological being. Question, does your body or spacecraft carry any germs or contamination that might be harmful to humans or other Earth life forms? Answer, no germs in space. Question, does your government know you are here? Answer, not at this time. Question, are others of your kind going to come looking for you? Answer, yes. Question, what is the weapons capability of your people? Answer, very destructive. I did not understand the exact nature of the kind of arms or weapons that they might have, but I did not feel that there was any malevolent intention in her reply, just a statement of fact. Question, why did your spacecraft crash? Answer, it was struck by an electrical discharge from the atmosphere, which caused us to lose control. Question, why was your spacecraft in this area? Answer, investigation of burning clouds, radiation, explosions. Question, how does your spacecraft fly? Answer, it is controlled through mind, responds to thought commands. Mind or thought command are the only English language words I can think of to describe the thought. Their bodies, and I think the spacecraft, are connected directly to them through some kind of electrical nervous system that they control with their own thoughts. Question, how do your people communicate with each other? Answer, through mind, thought. The words mind and thought combined together are the closest English language words I can think of to describe the idea at this time. However, it is very obvious to me that they communicate directly from the mind, just as she is communicating with me. Question, do you have a written language or symbols for communication? Answer, yes. Question, what planet are you from? Answer, the home, birthplace world of the domain. Since I am not an astronomer, I have no way of thinking in terms of stars, galaxies, constellations, and directions in space. The impression I received was of a planet in the center of a huge cluster of galaxies that is to her like home or birthplace. The word domain is the closest word I can think of to describe her concept, images, and thoughts about where she is from. It could as easily be called the territory or the realm. However, I'm sure that it was not just a planet or a solar system or a cluster of stars, but an enormous number of galaxies. Question, will your government send representatives to meet with our leaders? Answer, no. Question, what are your intentions concerning Earth? Answer, preserve, protect property of the domain. Question, what have you learned about Earth governments and military installations? Answer, poor, small, destroyed planet. Question, why haven't your people made your existence known to the people of Earth? Answer, watch, observe, no contact. I got the impression that contact with people on Earth was not permitted, but I could not think of a word or idea that communicated the impression I got exactly. They are just observing us. Question, have your people visited Earth previously? Answer, periodic, repeating observations. Question, how long have you known about Earth? Answer, long before humans. I'm not sure if the word prehistoric would be more accurate, but it was definitely a very long period of time before human beings evolved. Question, what do you know about the history of civilization on Earth? Answer, small interest, attention, small time. The answer to this question seemed very vague to me. However, I perceived that her interest in Earth history is not very strong, or that she did not pay much attention to it. Or maybe, I don't know. I really didn't get an answer to the question. Question, can you describe your home world to us? Answer, place of civilization, culture, history, large planet, wealth, resources always, order, power, knowledge, wisdom, 2 stars, 3 moons. Question, what is the state of development of your civilization? Answer, ancient, trillions of years, always, above all others, plan, schedule, progress, win, high goals, ideas. I use the number trillions because I am sure that the meaning was a number larger than many billions. The idea of the length of time she communicated is beyond me. It's really closer to the idea of infinity in terms of Earth years. Question, do you believe in God? Answer, we think. It is. Make it continue. Always. I am sure that the alien being does not understand the concept of God or worship as we do. I assume that the people in her civilization were all atheists. My impression was that they think very highly of themselves and are very prideful indeed. Question, what type of society do you have? Answer, order, power, future always, control, grow. These are the closest words I can use to describe the idea she had about her own society or civilization. Her emotion when communicating her response to this question became very intense, very bright and emphatic. Her thought was filled with an emotion that gave me a feeling of jubilation or joy, but it made me very nervous also. Question, are there other intelligent life forms besides yourself in the universe? Answer, everywhere. We are greatest, highest of all. Due to her small stature, I'm sure that she did not mean tallest or biggest. Again, her prideful nature showed through in the feeling that I received from her. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. This was the conclusion of the first interview. When the answers to the first list of questions were typed and given to the people who were waiting for them, they were very excited that I was able to get the alien to say anything. However, after they finished reading my answers, they were disappointed that I could not understand more clearly. Now they had a lot of new questions because of the answers I received to the first list of questions. An officer told me to await further instructions. I waited several hours in the adjoining office. I was not allowed to continue my interview with the alien. However, I was always well treated and allowed to eat and sleep and use the restroom facilities whenever I wanted. Eventually, a new list of questions was written for me to ask the alien. I gathered that quite a few other agents, government, and military officials had arrived at the base by this time. They told me that several other people would be in the room with me during the next interview so they could prompt me to ask for more detail during the interview. However, when I attempted to conduct the interview with these people in the room, I received no thoughts, emotions, or any other perceptible communication from the alien. Nothing. The alien just sat in a chair without moving. We all left the interview room. The intelligence agent became very agitated about this. He accused me of lying or making up the answers to the first questions. I insisted that all my answers were honest and as accurate as I could make them. Later that day, it was decided that several other people would attempt to ask questions of the alien. However, in spite of several attempts by different experts, no one else was ever able to get any communication at all from the alien. Over the next several days, a psychic research scientist from back east was flown to the base to interview the alien. Her name was Gertrude something or other. I don't remember the last name. On another occasion, an Indian clairvoyant named Krishnamurti came to the base to try to communicate with the alien. Neither one was successful at getting the alien to communicate anything. I was personally not able to communicate telepathically with either of these people either, although I did not think that Mr. Krishnamurti was a very kind and intelligent gentleman. Finally, it was decided that I should be left with the alien by myself to see if I could get any answers. Chapter 2, my second interview. In the next interview, I was told to ask the alien only one question. Official transcript of interview. Top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 10th, 1947. Question. Why have you stopped communicating? Answer. No stop. Others. Hidden, covered, secret fear. The alien cannot communicate with them because they were afraid of her or did not trust her. And it is clear to me that the alien is not aware that some people have secret intentions toward her and are hiding their real thoughts. It is equally obvious to me that the alien does not have even a tiny bit of fear of us, or anything else for that matter. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. I pondered the words I chose to convey the meaning of the alien's thoughts very carefully before reporting to the stenographer and the people who were waiting anxiously in the other room. Personally, I never suffered any fear or misapprehension about the alien whatsoever. I was very, very curious and excited to learn anything and everything I could about her and from her. However, like the aliens, I did not have much trust or confidence in the agents or authorities who were controlling my interviews. I had no idea what their intentions toward her might be. However, I am sure that the military officers were very, very nervous about having an alien spacecraft and pilot on their hands. At that moment, my greatest worry was how to more clearly understand the thoughts and ideas of the alien. I think that I was doing pretty well as a telepathic receiver, but not as good as a telepathic sender. I wanted desperately to figure out a better way to communicate with the alien in a way that would enable the growing legion of government officials to understand her more directly, without having to rely on my interpretation of her thoughts. I did not feel very well qualified to act as an interpreter, yet I was the only person with whom the alien would communicate, so it was up to me to get the job done. I was also becoming acutely aware that this was probably the biggest news event in the history of the Earth, and that I should be proud to have had any part in it. Of course, by that time, the entire incident had been officially denied in the press, and a cover-up of immense proportions by the military and the powers that be had already begun. However, I was beginning to feel the pressure of the responsibility for being the first person on Earth, as far as I knew, to communicate with an extraterrestrial life form. I think I know how Columbus must have felt when he discovered a new world the size of a continent on one small planet, but I was able to discover an entirely new unexplored universe. While I waited for my next instructions from my superiors, I went to my quarters under escort of several heavily armed MPs. Several other men dressed in black suits and ties accompanied me also. They were still there when I got up in the morning. After breakfast, which was brought to me in my own quarters, they escorted me back to the office at the base that was used for the interview. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 3, My Third Interview, Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, Personal Note. The third interview and all subsequent interviews that I had with the alien were observed and recorded, as I mentioned above, by dozens of other people. Although they were not physically present, a special room had been constructed with a window of one-way glass through which the interview could be observed from an adjoining room without intruding on the alien. The alien had been moved into a newly constructed room and was seated in an ordinary overstuffed living room chair covered with a flowery fabric. I'm sure that someone had been sent into town to buy a chair from the nearest available furniture store. The alien's body was about the same size as a very thin 5-year-old child, so she was dwarfed by the chair. Since her body was not biological, it didn't need any food, air, or heat, and apparently she didn't sleep either. There were no eyelids or eyebrows above her eyes, so the eyes didn't close. I don't think anyone could tell whether she was sleeping or awake as long as she was sitting upright in the chair. Unless she moved her body or gestured with her hand, it would be hard to tell whether she was even alive or not unless you could perceive her thoughts. Eventually, I learned that the alien was not identified by her body, but by her personality, so to speak. She was known by her fellow aliens as Errol. This is the closest word I can use to describe the name using the English alphabet. I sensed that she preferred the feminine gender. I think we shared a natural female empathy and nurturing attitude toward life and each other. I am sure she did not feel comfortable with the combative, aggressive, domineering attitude of the male officers and agents, each of whom was more concerned with their own personal self-importance and power than with discovering the secrets of the universe. When I entered the room, she was very pleased to see me. I felt a very genuine sense of recognition, relief, and a warm feeling from her. It was like the eager excitement and unconditional platonic affection one feels from a dog or a child, yet with a calm and reserved control. I must say that I was surprised that I felt the same sort of affection for the alien being, especially since we had spent so little time with each other. I was pleased that I was able to continue my interviews with her in spite of all the attention it was getting from the stream of government and military people arriving at the base. It was very obvious that the people who wrote the next series of questions for me wanted to learn how to communicate with the alien themselves without having to go through me. Here are the answers to the new list of questions. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 11th, 1947. Question, can you read or write any Earth languages? Answer, no. Question, do you understand numbers or mathematics? Answer, yes, I'm an officer, pilot, engineer. Question, can you write or draw symbols or pictures that we may be able to translate into our own language? Answer, uncertain. Question, are there any other signs or means of communication you can use to help us understand your thoughts more clearly? Answer, no. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. I was very sure that this was not true, but I understand clearly that Errol was not willing to communicate in writing or drawing or sign language. My feeling was that she was following orders like any soldier who had been captured, not to reveal any information that might be useful to an enemy, even under torture. She was only able and willing to reveal non-confidential or personal information or name, rank, and serial number. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 11th, 1947, second session. Question, can you show us on a map of the stars which is the star of your home planet? Answer, no. This is not because she does not know the directions from Earth to her home planet. She was unwilling to reveal the location. It was also due to the fact that the star system of her home planet does not exist on any star map on Earth. It's too far away. Question, how long will it take your people to locate you here? Answer, unknown. Question, how long would it take your people to travel here to rescue you? Answer, minutes or hours. Question, how can we make them understand that we do not intend to harm you? Answer, intentions are clear. See in your mind, images, feelings. Question, if you are not a biological entity, why do you refer to yourself as feminine? Answer, I am a creator, mother, source. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. These questions only took me a few minutes to complete. I realized then that we may be in for some serious trouble if the alien was not willing to cooperate or reveal any information that the military or intelligence agencies or scientists consider to be useful to them. I was also sure that the alien was very certain of the actual intentions of the people who wrote these questions, as she could read their minds just as easily as she could read my thoughts and communicate with me telepathically. Because of these intentions, she was unwilling and unable to cooperate with any of them in any way under any circumstances. And I am equally sure that since she is not a biological life form, that there was no kind of torture or coercion that would change her mind. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 4, The Language Barrier. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. After I explained what I thought were the reasons for the no answer to the intelligence agents, there was a great deal of upset and turmoil. A very heated discussion took place between some of the intelligence officers, military officials, psychologists, and the language interpreters. This lasted for several hours. It was finally decided that I should be allowed to continue to interview the alien, provided I could get a satisfactory answer from her to the following question. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 11th, 1947, third session. Question, what assurance or proof do you require from us that will make you feel safe enough to answer our questions? Answer, only she speaks, only she hears. Only she questions, no others. Must learn, know, understand. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. When I returned to the interview room to report the alien response to this question, I received a grim and skeptical reception from the assembled intelligence agents and military personnel. They could not understand what the alien meant by this. I admitted that I really couldn't understand what she meant either, but I was doing the best that I could to articulate her telepathic intentions. I told the officials that perhaps the communication problem had to do with my inability to understand the telepathic language of the alien clearly enough to be satisfactory. I was so discouraged at that point, I almost felt like giving up. And now there was even more arguments than before. I was sure I was going to be removed from my position in spite of the fact that the alien refused to communicate with anyone else, or that no one else had been found who could communicate with her. Fortunately, a very clever fellow named John Newble, who was a Japanese language specialist from the Navy, had an explanation and a solution to the problem. He explained that first, the problem had very little to do with the inability of the alien to communicate. It had more to do with her unwillingness to communicate with anyone other than myself. Second, in order for any clear, comprehensive communication to happen, both parties needed to understand and communicate through a common language. Words and symbols in language convey very precise concepts and meanings. He said that the Japanese people have a lot of homonyms in their language, which cause a lot of confusion in day-to-day communication. They solved this problem by using standard Chinese characters to write down the exact meaning of the word they are using. This clears up the matter for them. Without a defined nomenclature, communication was not possible beyond the rudimentary understanding between men and dogs or between two small children. The lack of a common vocabulary of clearly defined words that all parties can use fluently was the limiting factor in communication between all people, groups, or nations. Therefore, he suggested that there were only two choices. I had to learn to speak the language of the alien, or the alien had to learn to speak English. Factually, only one choice was possible, that I persuade Errol to learn English, and that I teach it to her with the guidance of the language specialist. No one had any objection to trying this approach, as there were no other suggestions. The language specialists suggested that I take several children's books and a basic reading primer and grammar text with me into the interview room. The plan was that I would sit next to the alien and read aloud to her from the books, while pointing to the text I was reading with my finger so that she could follow along. The theory was that the alien could eventually be taught to read just as a child is taught to read, by word and sound association with the written word, as well as instruction in fundamental grammar. They also assumed, I think, that if the alien was intelligent enough to communicate with me telepathically and fly a spacecraft across the galaxy, that she could probably learn to speak a language as quickly as a 5-year-old or faster. I returned to the interview room and proposed this idea to Errol. She did not object to learning the language, although she did not make any commitment to answer questions either. No one else had a better idea, so we went ahead. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 5, Reading Lessons, Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. I began the reading lessons with the first pages of a book that had been used to teach pioneer children in the 1800s on the frontiers of America. It is called McGuffey's Eclectic Reader, Primer through 6th. Since I am a nurse and not a teacher, the language expert who gave me the books also gave me an extensive briefing, a course that took an entire day, on how to use the books to teach the alien. He said the reason he chose these particular books was because the original 1836 version of these books were used for 3/4 of a century to teach about 4/5 of all American school children how to read. No other books ever had so much influence over American children for so long. McGuffey's educational course begins in the primer by presenting the letters of the alphabet to be memorized in sequence. Children were then taught step by step to use the building blocks of the language to form and pronounce words using the phonics method, which involves teaching children to connect sounds with letters. Each lesson begins with a study of the words used in the reading exercise, and with markings to show the correct pronunciation for each word. I discovered that the stories in the first and second readers picture children in their relationship with family members, teachers, friends, and animals. The third, fourth, fifth, and sixth readers expanded on those ideas. One of the stories I remember was The Widow and the Merchant. It's kind of a morality tale about a merchant who befriends a widow in need. Later, when the widow proves herself to be honest, the merchant gives her a nice gift. The books do not necessarily teach you to believe that charity is expected only of wealthy, though. We all know that generosity is a virtue that should be practiced by everyone. All of the stories were very wholesome, and they gave very good explanations to illustrate virtues like honesty, charity, thrift, hard work, courage, patriotism, reverence for God, and respect for parents. Personally, I would recommend this book to anyone. I also discovered that the vocabulary used in the book was very advanced compared to the relatively limited number of words people use commonly in our modern age. I think that we have lost a lot of our own language since our founding fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence over 200 years ago. As instructed, I sat next to Errol in the interview room, reading aloud to her from each successive book in the series of the McGuffey Readers. Each of the books had excellent, simple illustrations of the stories and subjects being taught, although they are very outdated by today's standards. Nonetheless, Errol seemed to understand and absorb every word, sound, syllable, and meaning as we progressed. We continued this process for 14 hours a day for 3 consecutive days without interruption, except for a few meals and rest breaks on my part. Errol did not take breaks for anything. She did not sleep. Instead, she remained sitting in the overstuffed chair in the interview room, reviewing the lessons we had already covered. When I returned each morning to begin where we'd left off, she had already memorized the previous lessons and was well into the next pages. This pattern continued to accelerate until it became pointless for me to continue reading to her. Although Errol did not have a mouth to speak with, she was now able to think at me in English. At the end of these lessons, Errol was able to read and study by herself. I showed her how to use a dictionary to look up new words she encountered. Errol consulted the dictionary continually after that. From then on, my job was acting as a courier for her, requesting that reference books be brought to her in a steady stream. Next, Mr. Newble brought in a set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Errol especially enjoyed this because it had a lot of pictures. After that, she requested many more picture books and reference books with photographs and drawings, because it was much easier to understand the meaning if she could see a picture of the thing she was studying. Over the next 6 days, books were brought in from libraries all over the country, I presume, because it wasn't more than a few more days before she had read through several hundred of them. She studied every subject I could imagine and many other very technical things I never wanted to know anything about, like astronomy, metallurgy, engineering, mathematics, various technical manuals, and so forth. Later, she began to read fiction books, novels, poetry, and the classics of literature. Errol also asked to read a great many books on the subjects in the humanities, especially history. I think she must have read at least 50 books about human history and archaeology. Of course, I made sure that she received a copy of the Holy Bible also, which she read from cover to cover without comment or questions. Although I continued to stay with Errol for 12 to 14 hours each day, most of that time during the following week had been spent without much communication between us, except for an occasional question she asked me. The questions were usually meant to give her a sense of context or to clarify something in the books she was reading. Oddly, Errol told me that her favorite books were Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Don Quixote's de la Mancha, and 1001 Nights. She said the authors of these stories showed that it is more important to have a great spirit and imagination than great skill or power. I could not answer a lot of her questions, so I consulted with people in the outer rooms for answers. Most of these had to do with technical and scientific things. A few of her questions were about the humanities. The depth of complex understanding and subtlety of her questions showed that she had a very penetrating intellect. Personally, I think she had already known a lot more about the culture and history of Earth than she was willing to admit when we started. I would soon. Chapter 6. My Education Begins. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy personal note. By the 15th day after rescuing Errol from the crash site, I was able to communicate fluidly and effortlessly with her in English. She had absorbed so much more written material by this time that her academic education far exceeded my own. Although I graduated from high school in Los Angeles in 1940 and attended college for 4 years of pre-medical and nursing training, the variety of my own reading had been fairly limited. I had not studied most of the subjects to which Errol had now been exposed, especially considering her acute understanding, very intense study habits, and a nearly photographic memory. She was able to recall long passages from books she read. She was especially fond of sections of her favorite stories from classic literature like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Tales from Gulliver's Travels, and Peter Pan, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. By this time, Errol had become the teacher and I was the student. I was about to learn what men of Earth don't know and have no way of knowing. The throng of scientists and agents who observed us through the one-way glass of our interview room, whom Errol and I now referred to as the gallery, were growing increasingly impatient to ask her questions. But Errol continued to refuse to allow any questions to be asked of her by anyone other than myself, even vicariously through me as an interpreter or in writing. On the afternoon of the 16th day, Errol and I sat next to each other as she read. She closed the last page of a book she was reading and placed it aside. I was about to hand her the next book from a large pile waiting to be read when she turned and said, or thought to me, "I'm ready to speak now." At first I was a little confused by the remark. I gestured for her to continue, and she began to teach me my first lesson. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 59th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 24th, 1947. First session. "What would you like to say, Errol?" I asked. "I have been part of a domain expeditionary force in this sector of space for several thousand years. However, I have not personally had intimate contact with beings on Earth since 5965 BCE. It is not my primary function to interact with inhabitants of planets within the domain. I am an officer, pilot, and engineer with many duties to perform. Nonetheless, although I'm fluent in 347 other languages within the domain, I have not been exposed to your English language. The last Earth language with which I was conversant was the Sanskrit language of the Vedic hymns. At that time, I was a member of a mission sent to investigate the loss of a domain base located in the Himalaya Mountains. An entire battalion of officers, pilots, communications, and administrative personnel disappeared and the base destroyed. Several million years ago, I was trained and served as an investigation, data evaluation, and program development officer for the domain. Because I was experienced in that technology, I was sent to Earth as part of a search team. One of my duties involved interrogation of the human population that inhabited the adjoining area at that time. Many of the people in that region reported sighting Vimanas, or spacecraft, in the area. Following the logical extension of evidence, testimony, observation, as well as the absence of certain evidence, I led my team to the discovery that there were still old Empire ships and well-hidden old Empire installations in this solar system of which we had been completely unaware. You and I were unable to communicate in your language because I personally have not been exposed to your language. However, now that I have scanned the books and the material you provided me, this data has been relayed to our space station in this region and processed by our communications officer through our computers. It has been translated into my own language and relayed back to me in a context that I can think with. I have also received additional information from the files stored in our computers about the English language and domain records concerning Earth civilization. Now I'm prepared to give you certain information that I feel will be of great value to you. I will tell you the truth. Although truth is relative to all other truth, I wish to share with you as honestly and accurately as possible truth as I see it within the boundaries of my integrity to myself, to my race, and without violating my obligations to the organization I serve and have sworn to uphold and protect. Okay, I thought. Will you answer questions from the gallery now? No, I will not answer questions. I will provide information to you that I think will be beneficial to the well-being of the immortal spiritual beings who comprise humanity, and that will foster the survival of all the myriad life forms and the environment of Earth, as it is a part of my mission to ensure the preservation of Earth. Personally, it is my conviction that all sentient beings are immortal spiritual beings. This includes human beings. For the sake of accuracy and simplicity, I will use a made-up word, is-be, because the primary nature of an immortal being is that we live in a timeless state of is, and the only reason for their existence is that they decide to be. No matter how lowly their station in a society, every is-be deserves the respect and treatment that I myself would like to receive from others. Each person on Earth continues to be an is-be, whether they are aware of the fact or not. Matilda O'Donnell Macleroy, personal note. I will never forget this conversation. Her tone was very matter-of-fact and emotionless. However, for the first time I sensed the presence of a warm and real personality in Errol. Her reference to immortal spiritual beings struck me like a flash of light in a dark room. I had never before considered that a human being could be an immortal being. I thought that status or power was reserved solely for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And because I am a devout Catholic and subject to the word of the Lord Jesus and the Holy Father, I have never thought of a woman as an immortal spiritual being either, not even the Holy Mother Mary. Yet when Errol thought that thought, I became vividly aware for the first time that she personally was an immortal spiritual being, and so are we all. Errol said that she sensed that I was confused about the idea. She said she would demonstrate to me that I am also an immortal spiritual being. She said, "Be above your body." Immediately, I realized that I was outside of my body, looking down from the ceiling at the top of my body's head. I was also able to see the room around me, including Errol's body, sitting in the chair next to my own body. After a moment, I realized the simple but shocking reality that I am not a body. In that moment, a black veil lifted, and for the first time in my life, and for a very long time into the past, I realized that I am not my soul, but that I am me, a spiritual being. This was an unexplainable epiphany, but one that fills me with joy and relief I cannot recall having experienced ever before. As for the immortal part, I do not understand her meaning, as I have always been taught that I am not immortal, a spirit perhaps, but certainly not immortal. After a moment, I'm not sure how long, Errol asked me if I had a better understanding of the idea. Suddenly, I was back inside my body again and said out loud, "Yes, I see what you mean." I was so taken aback by the experience that I had to get up from my chair and walk around the room for a few minutes. I made an excuse that I needed to get a drink of water and go to the restroom, which I did. In the restroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. I used the toilet, refreshed my makeup, and straightened my uniform. After 10 or 15 minutes, I felt more normal again and returned to the interview room. After that, I felt as though I was no longer an interpreter for Errol. I felt as though I was a kindred spirit. I felt like I was safe at home with a trusted friend or a family member, as close as any I had ever had. Errol sensed and understood my confusion about the concept of personal immortality. She began her first lesson with me by explaining this to me. Official transcript of interview continued. Errol told me her reasons for coming to Earth and for being in the area of the 509th Bomber Squadron. She was sent by her superior officers to investigate the explosions of nuclear weapons, which have been tested in New Mexico. Her superiors ordered her to gather information from the atmosphere that could be used to determine the extent of radiation and potential harm this might cause to the environment. During her mission, the spacecraft was struck by a lightning, which caused her to lose control and crash. The spacecraft is operated by ISBs who use doll bodies in much the same way that an actor wears a mask and costume. It is like a mechanical tool through which to operate in the physical world. She, as well as all the other ISBs of the officer class and their superiors, inhabit these dull bodies when they are on duty in space. When they are not on duty, they leave the body and operate, think, communicate, travel, and exist without the use of a body. The bodies are constructed of synthetic materials, including a very sensitive electrical nervous system to which each ISB adjusts themselves or tune in to an electronic wavelength that is matched uniquely to the wavelength or frequency emitted by each ISB. Each ISB is capable of creating a unique wave frequency which identifies them much like a radio signal frequency. This serves in part as identification like a fingerprint. The dull body acts like a radio receiver for the ISB. No two frequencies or dull bodies are exactly the same. The bodies of each ISB crew member are likewise tuned into and connected to a nervous system built into the spacecraft. The spacecraft is built in much the same way as the dull body. It is adjusted specifically to the frequency of each ISB crew member. Therefore, the craft can be operated by the thoughts or energy emitted by the ISB. It is really a very simple direct control system, so there are no complicated controls or navigation equipment on board the spacecraft. They operate as an extension of the ISB. When the lightning bolt struck the spacecraft, this caused a short circuit and consequently disconnected them from the control of the ship momentarily, which resulted in the crash. Errol was and still is an officer, pilot, and engineer in an expeditionary force which is part of a space opera civilization which refers to itself as the Domain. This civilization controls the vast number of galaxies, stars, planets, moons, and asteroids throughout an area of space that is approximately 1/4 of the entire physical universe. The continuing mission of her organization is to secure, control, and expand the territory and resources of the Domain. Errol pointed out that their own activities were very similar in many ways to the European explorers who discovered and claimed the New World for the Holy Father, the Pope, and for the kings of Spain, Portugal, and later Holland, England, France, and so forth. Europe benefited from the property acquired from the native inhabitants. However, the native inhabitants were never consulted with or asked for their permission to become a part of the domain of the European nations and the soldiers and priests they sent to acquire territory and wealth in order to advance their interests. Errol said she read in a history book that the Spanish king regretted the brutal treatment of the native inhabitants by his soldiers. He feared retribution from the gods he worshipped, as described in the various testaments of the Bible. He asked the Pope to prepare a statement called the Requirement, which was supposed to be read to each of the newly encountered native inhabitants. The king hoped that the statement, whether it was accepted or rejected by the natives, would absolve the king of all responsibility for the resulting slaughter and enslavement of these people. He used this statement as justification to confiscate their lands and possessions by his soldiers and the Pope's priests. Apparently, the Pope personally did not have any feelings of guilt or responsibility in the matter. Errol thought that such actions were those of a coward, and that it is no surprise that the territory of Spain was diminished so quickly. Only a few years later, the king was dead, and his empire had been assimilated by other nations. Errol said that this sort of behavior does not occur in the domain. Their leaders assume full responsibility for the actions of the domain and would not denigrate themselves in this fashion, nor do they fear any gods or have any regret for their actions. This idea reinforces my earlier suggestion that Errol and her people are probably atheists. In the case of the acquisition of Earth by the domain, the rulers of the domain have chosen not to openly reveal this intention to their native inhabitants of Earth until a later time when it may or may not suit their interest to reveal themselves. For the present time, it is not strategically necessary to make the presence of the domain expeditionary force known to mankind. In fact, until now, it has been very aggressively hidden for reasons that will be revealed later. The asteroid belt near Earth is very small, but important location for the domain in this part of space. Actually, some of the objects in our solar system are very valuable for their use as low-gravity space stations. They are interested primarily in the low-gravity satellites in this solar system, which consists mainly of the side of the moon facing away from Earth and the asteroid belt, which is a planet that was destroyed billions of years ago, and to a lesser degree Mars and Venus. Dome structures synthesized from gypsum or underground bases covered by electromagnetic force fields are easily constructed to house the domain forces. Once an area of space is acquired by the domain and becomes a part of the territory under its control, it is treated as the property of the domain. The space station near the planet Earth is important only because it lay along a path of the domain expansion route toward the center of the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. Of course, everyone in the domain is aware of this, except for the people of Earth. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 7, A Lesson in Ancient History. Matilda Macleroy, personal note. My instruction with Errol continued through the night until dawn of the next morning. I must say that I was fascinated, skeptical, shocked, alarmed, dismayed, and disgruntled by the lesson I was getting from Errol. I could never have imagined any of what she was telling me, not even in my wildest dreams and nightmares. The next afternoon, after I had slept, showered, and eaten, I was debriefed about my interview session the previous evening by members of the gallery who recorded my account of what Errol told me. There was a stenographer present for the session as usual, to whom I debriefed after each interview, and there were also 6 or 7 men who asked for clarification of my statements. As always, there was constant pressure applied to me to use my influence with Errol to persuade her to answer specific questions prompted by members of the gallery. I did my best to reassure everyone that I would give my very best efforts to do so. Nevertheless, only 3 things happened every day thereafter. Errol resolutely refused to answer any questions that she sensed had been posed by or suggested to me by the gallery. 2. Errol continued to instruct me in the subject matter of her own choice. 3. Every evening after my interview with or instruction from Errol, she would give me a new list of subject matter about which she wanted more information. Each evening, I presented this list to the gallery. The next day, Errol received a large stack of books, magazines, articles, and so forth. She would study all of these during the night while I slept. This pattern repeated every day during the remainder of the time I spent with her. The subject matter of my next interview or lesson from Errol continued with a brief history of Earth, our solar system, and nearby space from the perspective of the domain. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, July 25, 1947, first session. Before you can understand the subject of history, you must first understand the subject of time. Time is simply an arbitrary measurement of the motion of objects through space. Space is not linear. Space is determined by point of view of an ISB when viewing an object. The distance between an ISB and the object being viewed is called space. Objects or energy masses in space do not necessarily move in a linear fashion. In this universe, objects tend to move randomly or in a curving or cyclical pattern, or as determined by agreed-upon rules. History is not only a linear record of events, as many authors of Earth history books imply, because it is not a string that can be stretched out and marked like a measuring tool. History is a subjective observation of the movement of objects through space, recorded from the point of view of a survivor rather than those who succumbed. Events occur interactively and concurrently, just as the biological body has a heart that pumps blood while the lungs provide oxygen to the cells, which reproduce using energy from the sun and chemicals from plants at the same time as the liver strains toxic wastes from the blood and eliminates them through the bladder and the bowels. All of these interactions are concurrent and simultaneous. Although time runs consecutively, events do not happen in an independent linear stream. In order to view and understand the history or reality of the past, one must view all the events as part of an interactive whole. Time can also be sensed as a vibration, which is uniform throughout the entire physical universe. Errol explained that ISBs have been around since before the beginning of the universe. The reason that they are called immortal is because a spirit is not born and cannot die, but exists in a personally postulated perception of is, will be. She was careful to explain that every spirit is not the same. Each is completely unique in identity, power, awareness, and ability. The difference between an Isby like Errol and most of the Isbys inhabiting bodies on Earth is that Errol can enter and depart from her doll at will. She can perceive at selective depths through matter. Errol and other officers of the domain can communicate telepathically. Since an Isby is not a physical universe entity, it has no location in space or time. An Isby is literally immaterial. They can span great distances of space instantly. They can experience sensations more intensely than a biological body without the use of physical sensory mechanisms. An Isby can exclude pain from their perception. Errol can also remember her identity, so to speak, all the way back into the dim mists of time for trillions of years. She says that the existing collection of suns in this immediate vicinity of the universe have been burning for the last 200 trillion years. The age of the physical universe is nearly infinitely old, but probably at least 4 quadrillion years since its earliest beginnings. Time is a difficult factor to measure as it depends on the subjective memory of Isbys, and there has been no uniform record of events throughout the physical universe since it began. As on Earth, there are many different time measurement systems defined by various cultures, which use cycles of motion and points of origin to establish age and duration. The physical universe itself is formed from the convergence and amalgamation of many other individual universes, each of which were created by an Isby or group of Isbys. The collision of these illusionary universes commingled and coalesced and were solidified to form a mutually created universe. Because it is agreed that energy and forms can be created but not destroyed, this creative process has continued to form an ever-expanding universe of nearly infinite physical proportions. Before the formation of the physical universe, there was a vast period during which universes were not solid, but wholly illusionary. You might say that the universe was a universe of magic illusions, which were made to appear and vanish at the will of the magician. In every case, the magician was one or more Isbys. Many Isbys on Earth can still recall vague images from that period. Tales of magic, sorcery, and enchantment, fairy tales and mythology speak of such things, although in very crude terms. Each Isby entered into the physical universe when they lost their own home universe. That is, when an Isby's home universe was overwhelmed by the physical universe, or when the Isby joined with other Isbys to create or conquer the physical universe. On Earth, the ability to determine when an Isby entered the physical universe is difficult for 2 reasons. 1, the memory of Isbys on Earth have been erased, and 2, Isby's arrival or invasion into the physical universe took place at different times, some 60 trillion years ago, and others only 3 trillion. Every once in a short while, a few million years, an area or planet will be taken over by another group of Isbys entering into the area. Sometimes they will capture other Isbys as slaves. They will be forced to inhabit bodies to perform menial or manual work, especially mining mineral ores on heavy gravity planets such as Earth. Errol says that she has been a member of the Domain Expeditionary Force for more than 625 million years. When she became a pilot for a biological survey mission, which included occasional visits to Earth. She can remember her entire career there and for a very long time before that. She told me that Earth scientists do not have an accurate measuring system to gauge the age of matter. They assume that because certain types of materials seem to deteriorate rather quickly, such as organic or carbon-based matter, that there is a deterioration of matter. It is not accurate to measure the age of stone based on the measurement of the age of wood or bone. This is a fundamental error. Factually, matter does not deteriorate. It cannot be destroyed. Matter can only be altered in form, but it is never truly destroyed. The domain has conducted a periodic survey of the galaxies in this sector of the universe since it developed space travel technologies about 80 trillion years ago. A review of changes in the complexion of Earth revealed that mountain ranges rise and fall, continents change location, the poles of the planet shift, ice caps come and go, oceans appear and disappear, rivers, valleys, and canyons change. In all cases, the matter is the same. It is always the same sand. Every form and substance is made of the same basic materials which never deteriorates. Matilda O'Donnell Macleroy, personal note. I cannot even begin to imagine how advanced a civilization may have become technically and mentally after trillions of years. Just think of how advanced our own country has become compared to only 150 years ago. Only a few generations ago, transportation was on foot, horseback, or boat. Reading was done by candlelight. Heating and cooking were done over a fireplace, and there wasn't any indoor plumbing. Official transcript of interview. Errol described the abilities of an ISB officer of the domain to me, and she demonstrated one to me when she contacted telepathically a communications officer of the domain who was stationed in the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is composed of thousands of broken up pieces of a planet that once existed between Mars and Jupiter. It serves as a good low-gravity jumping-off point for incoming spacecraft traveling toward the center of our galaxy. She requested that this officer consult information stored in the files of the domain concerning the history of Earth. She asked the communications officer to feed this information to Errol. The communications officer immediately complied with the request. Based on the information stored in the files of the domain, Errol was able to give me a brief overview of our history lesson. This is what Errol told me that the domain had observed about the history of Earth. She told me that the domain expeditionary force first entered into the Milky Way galaxy very recently, only about 10,000 years ago. The first action was to conquer the home planets of the Old Empire. This is not the official name, but a nickname given to the conquered civilization by the domain forces that served as the seat of central government for this galaxy and other adjoining regions of space. These planets are located in the stars systems in the tail of the Big Dipper constellation. She did not mention which stars exactly. About 1,500 years later, the domain began the installation bases for their own forces along the path of invasion which leads towards the center of the galaxy and beyond. About 8,200 years ago, the domain forces set up a base on Earth in the Himalaya Mountains near the border of modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. This was a base for the battalion of the Domain Expeditionary Force, which included about 3,000 members. They set up a base under or inside the top of the mountain. The mountaintop was drilled into and made hollow to create an area large enough to house the ships and personnel of that force. An electronic illusion of the mountaintop was created to hide the base by projecting a false image from inside the mountain against a force screen. The ships could then enter and exit through the force screen, yet remain unseen by Homo sapiens. Shortly after they settled there, the base was surprised by an attack from a remnant of the military forces of the old empire. Unbeknownst to the domain, a hidden underground base on Mars, operated by the old empire, had existed for a very long time. The domain base was wiped out by a military attack from the Mars base, and the ISBs of the Domain Expeditionary Force were captured. You can imagine that the domain was very upset about losing such a large force of officers and crew, so they sent other crews to Earth to look for them. Those crews were also attacked. The captured ISBs from the domain forces were handled in the same fashion as all other ISBs who have been sent to Earth. They were each given amnesia, had their memories replaced with false pictures and hypnotic commands, and sent to Earth to inhabit biological bodies. They are still a part of the human population today. After a very persistent and extensive investigation into the loss of their crews, the domain discovered that Old World Empire has been operating a very extensive and very carefully hidden base of operations in this part of the galaxy for millions of years. No one knows exactly how long. Eventually, the spacecraft of the old Empire forces and the Domain engaged each other in open combat in the space of the solar system. According to Errol, there was a running battle between the old Empire forces and the Domain until about 1235 AD, when the Domain forces finally destroyed the last of the spacecraft of the old Empire force in this area. The Domain Expeditionary Force lost many of its own ships in this area during that time also. About 1,000 years later, the old Empire base was discovered by accident in the spring of 1914 AD. About 1,000 years later, the old Empire base was discovered by accident in the spring of 1914 AD. The discovery was made when the body of the Archduke of Austria was taken over by an officer of the Domain Expeditionary Force. This officer, who was stationed in the asteroid belt, was sent to Earth on a routine mission to gather reconnaissance. The purpose of this takeover was to use the body as a disguise through which to infiltrate human society in order to gather information about current events on Earth. The officer, as an ISB, having greater power than the being inhabiting the body of the Archduke, simply pushed the being out and took over control of the body. However, this officer did not realize how much the Habsburgs were hated by feuding factions in the country, so he was caught off guard when the body of the Archduke was assassinated by the Bosnian student. The officer, or ISB, was suddenly knocked out of the body when it was shot by the assassin. Disoriented, the ISB inadvertently penetrated one of the Amnesia Force screens and was captured. Eventually, the Domain discovered that a wide area of space is monitored by an electronic force field which controls all of the ISBs in this end of the galaxy, including Earth. The electronic force screen is designed to detect ISBs and prevent them from leaving the area. If an ISB attempts to penetrate the force screen, it captures them in a kind of electronic net. The result is that the captured ISB is subjected to very severe brainwashing treatment, which erases the memory of the ISB. This process uses a tremendous electrical shock, just like the Earth psychiatrists use electrical shock therapy to erase the memory and personality of a patient and to make them more cooperative. On Earth, this therapy uses only a few hundred volts of electricity. However, the electrical voltage used by the old Empire operation against ISBs is on the order of magnitude of billions of volts. This tremendous shock completely wipes out all the memory of the ISB. The memory erasure is not just for one life or one body. It wipes out all the accumulated experiences of a nearly infinite past, as well as the identity of the ISB. The shock was intended to make it impossible for the ISB to remember who they are, where they came from, their knowledge or skills, their memory of the past, and ability to function as a spiritual entity. They're overwhelmed into becoming a mindless, robotic non-entity. After the shock, a series of post-hypnotic suggestions are used to install false memories and a false time orientation in each ISB. This includes the command to return to the base after the body dies, so that the same kind of shock and hypnosis can be done again and again and again forever. The hypnotic command also tells the patient to forget to remember. What the Domain learned from the experience of this officer is that the old Empire has been using Earth as a prison planet for a very long time. Exactly how long is unknown, perhaps millions of years. So when the body of the ISB dies, they depart from the body. They are detected by the force screen, they are captured, and ordered by hypnotic command to return to the light. The idea of heaven and the afterlife are part of the hypnotic suggestion, a part of the treachery which makes the whole mechanism work. After the ISB has been shocked and hypnotized to erase the memory of the life just lived, the ISB is immediately commanded hypnotically to report back to the Earth as though they were on a secret mission to inhabit a new body. Each ISB is told that they have a special purpose for being on Earth, but of course there is no purpose for being in a prison, at least not for the prisoner. Any undesirable ISBs who are sentenced to Earth were classified as untouchable by the old Empire. This included anyone that the old Empire judged to be criminals who are too vicious to be reformed or subdued, as well as other criminals such as sex perverts or beings unwilling to do any productive work. An untouchable classification of ISBs also includes a variety of political prisoners. This includes ISBs who are considered to be non-compliant freethinkers or revolutionaries who make trouble for the governments of the various planets of the old empire. Of course, anyone with a previous military record against the old empire is also shipped off to Earth. A list of untouchables includes artists, painters, singers, musicians, writers, actors, and performers of every kind. For this reason, Earth has more artists per capita than any other planet in the old empire. Untouchables also include intellectuals, inventors, and geniuses in almost every field. Since everything the old empire considers valuable has long since been invented or created over the last few trillion years, they have no further use for such beings. This includes skilled managers also, which are not needed in a society of obedient robotic citizens. Anyone who is not willing or able to submit to mindless economic, political, and religious servitude as a tax-paying worker in the class system of the old empire are untouchable and sentenced to receive memory wipeout and permanent imprisonment on Earth. The next result is that an ISB is unable to escape because they can't remember who they are, where they came from, where they are. They have been hypnotized to think that they are someone, something, sometime, and somewhere other than where they really are. The domain officer who was assassinated while in the body of Archduke of Austria was likewise captured by the old empire force. Because this particular officer was a high-powered ISB compared to most, he was taken away to a secret old empire base under the surface of the planet Mars. They put him into a special electronic prison cell and held him there. Fortunately, this domain officer was able to escape from the underground base after 27 years in captivity. When he escaped from the old empire base, he returned immediately to his own base in the asteroid belt. His commanding officer ordered that a battle cruiser be dispatched to the coordinates of that base provided by this officer and to destroy that base completely. This old empire base was located a few hundred miles north of the equator on Mars in the Cydonia region. Although the military base of the old empire was destroyed, unfortunately much of the vast machinery of the ISB-4 screens, the electroshock, amnesia, hypnosis machinery, continues to function in other undiscovered locations right up to the present moment. The main base or control center for this mind control prison operation has never been found, so the influences of this base or bases are still in effect. The domain has observed that since the old empire space forces were destroyed, there is no one left to actively prevent other planetary systems from bringing their own untouchable ISBs to Earth from all over this galaxy and from other galaxies nearby. Therefore, Earth has become a universal dumping ground for this entire region of space. This in part explains the very unusual mix of races, cultures, languages, moral codes, religious and political influences among the ISB population on Earth. The number and variety of heterogeneous societies on Earth are extremely unusual on a normal planet. Most Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets are inhabited by only one humanoid body type or race, if any. In addition, most of the ancient civilizations of Earth and many of the events of Earth have been heavily influenced by the hidden hypnotic operation of the old empire base. So far, no one has figured out exactly where and how this operation is run or by whom because it is so heavily protected by screens and traps. Furthermore, there has been no operation undertaken to seek out, discover, and destroy the vast and ancient network of electronics machinery that create the ISB-4 screens at this end of the galaxy. Until this has been done, we are not able to prevent or interrupt the electric shock operation, hypnosis, and remote thought control of the old empire prison planet. Of course, all the crew members of the Domain Expeditionary Force now remain aware of this phenomena at all times while operating in this solar system space so as to prevent detection and the capture by old empire traps. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 8, A Lesson in Recent History. Matilda Macleroy, personal note. This interview taught me a history lesson I will never read in any textbook written on Earth. The Domain has a much different view of events than we do. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, Alien Interview. July 26, 1947, first session. The Domain Expeditionary Force has observed the resurgence in science and culture of the Western world since 1150 AD, when the remaining remnants of the space fleet of the old empire in this solar system were destroyed. The influence of the remote control hypnosis operation diminished slightly after that time, but still remains largely in force. Apparently, a small amount of damage was done to the old world remote mind control operation, which resulted in a small decrease in the power of this mechanism. As a result, some memory of technologies that ISBs already knew before they came to Earth started to be remembered. Thereafter, the oppression of knowledge that is called the Dark Ages in Europe began to diminish after that time. Since then, the knowledge of the basic laws of physics and electricity have revolutionized Earth culture virtually overnight. The ability to remember technology by many of the geniuses in the ISB population of Earth was partially restored, when not so actively suppressed as it was before 1150 AD. Sir Isaac Newton is one of the best examples of this. In only a few decades, he single-handedly reinvented several major and fundamental scientific and mathematic principles. The men who remembered these sciences already knew them before they were sent to Earth. Ordinarily, no one would ever observe or discover as much about science and mathematics in a single lifetime or even a few hundred lifetimes. These subjects have taken civilians billions and billions of years to create. ISBs on Earth have only just begun to remember small fragments of all the technologies that exist throughout the universe. Theoretically, if the amnesia mechanisms being used against Earth could be broken entirely, ISBs would regain all their memory. Unfortunately, similar advances have not been seen in the humanities, as the ISBs of Earth continue to behave very badly toward each other. This behavior, however, is heavily influenced by the hypnotic commands given to each ISB between lifetimes, and the very unusual combination of inmates on Earth, criminals, perverts, artists, revolutionaries, and geniuses, is the cause of a very restive and tumultuous environment. The purpose of the prison planet is to keep ISBs on Earth forever. Promoting ignorance, superstition, and war between ISBs helps keep the prison population crippled and trapped behind the wall of electronic force screens. ISBs have been dumped on Earth from all over the galaxy, adjoining galaxies, and from planetary systems all over the old empire, like Sirius, Aldebaran, the Pleiades, Orion, Draconis, and countless others. There are ISBs on Earth from unnamed races, civilizations, cultural backgrounds, and planetary environments. Each of the various ISB populations have their own language, belief systems, moral values, religious beliefs, training, and unknown and untold histories. These ISBs are mixed together with earlier inhabitants of Earth who came from another star system more than 400,000 years ago to establish the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. Those civilizations vanished beneath the tidal waves caused by a planetary polar shift many thousands of years ago, before the current prison population started to arrive. Apparently, the ISBs from those star systems were the source of the original Oriental races of Earth, beginning in Australia. On the other hand, the civilizations set up on Earth by the old empire prison system were very different from the civilization of the old empire itself, which is an electronic space opera, atomic-powered conglomeration of earlier civilizations that were conquered with nuclear weapons and colonized by ISBs from another galaxy. The bureaucracy that controlled the former old empire was from an ancient space opera society run by a totalitarian confederation of planetary governments, regulated by a brutal social, economic, and political hierarchy, with a royal monarch as its figurehead. This type of government emerges with regularity on planets where the citizens abandon personal responsibility for autonomous self-regulation. They frequently lose their freedom to demented ISBs who suffer from an overwhelming paranoia that every other ISB is their enemy who must be controlled or destroyed. Their closest friends and allies, whom they espouse to love and cherish, are literally loved to death by them. Because such ISBs exist, the domain has learned that freedom must be won and maintained through eternal vigilance and the ability to use defensive force to maintain it. As a result, the domain has already conquered the governing planet of the old empire. The civilization of the domain, although considerably younger and smaller in size, is already more powerful, better organized, and united by an egalitarian esprit de corps never known in the history of the old empire. The recently despoiled German totalitarian state on Earth was similar to the old empire, but not nearly as brutal, and about 10,000 times less powerful. Many of the ISBs on Earth are here because they are violently opposed to the totalitarian government, or because they were so psychotically vicious that they could not be controlled by the old empire government. Consequently, the population of Earth is disproportionately comprised of a very high percentage of such beings. The conflicting cultural and ethical moral codes of the ISBs on Earth is unusual in the extreme. The domain conquest of the central old empire planets was fought with electronic cannon. The citizens of the planet forming the core of government for the old empire are a filthy, degraded, slave society of mindless, tax-paying workers who practice cannibalism. Violent automotive racetracks and bloody Roman circus-type entertainments are their only amusements. Regardless of any reasonable justification we may have had for using atomic weapons to vanquish the planets of the old empire, the domain is careful not to ruin the resources of those planets by using weapons of crude radioactive force. The current U.S. civilization is beginning to mimic some of the trappings of that civilization, especially in the design of airplanes, automobiles, ships, trains, and telephones. Likewise, buildings in the cities of Earth are thought to be modern or futuristic if their design resembles the architecture of the old empire. The government of the old empire, before being supplanted by the domain, was comprised of beings who possessed a very craven intelligence, very much like the Axis powers during your recent World War. Those beings manifested precisely the same behavior as the galactic government that exiled them to external imprisonment on Earth. They were a gruesome reminder of the ageless maxim that an ISB will often manifest the treatment they have received from others. Kindness fosters kindness. Cruelty begets cruelty. One must be able and willing to use force tempered with intelligence to prevent harm to the innocent. However, extraordinary understanding, self-discipline, and courage are required to effectively prevent brutality without being overwhelmed by the malice that motivated the brutality. Only a demonic, self-serving government would employ a logic or science to conceive that an ultimate solution to any problem is to murder and permanently erase the memory of every artist, genius, skilled manager, and inventor, and cast them into a planetary prison, together with political opponents, killers, thieves, perverts, and disabled beings of an entire galaxy. Once the ISBs expelled from the old empire arrived on Earth, they were given amnesia and hypnotically tricked into thinking that something else had happened to them. The next step was to implant the ISBs into biological bodies on Earth. The bodies became the human populations of false civilizations, which were designed and installed in the minds of the ISBs to look completely unlike the old empire. All of the ISBs of India, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe were guided to a pattern and build the cultural elements of these societies based on standard patterns developed by the ISBs of many earlier similar civilizations on Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets that have existed for trillions of years throughout the universe. In the earliest times, the ISBs sent to prison Earth lived in India. They gradually spread into Mesopotamia, Egypt, Mesoamerica, Archaea, Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, and to the New World. They were hypnotically commanded to follow the pattern of a given civilization by the old empire prison operators. This is an effective mechanism to disguise the actual time and location from the ISBs imprisoned on Earth. The languages, customs, and culture of each false civilization are intended to reinforce amnesia because they do not remind the ISBs on Earth of the original old empire planets from which they were deported. On the very far back track of time, these types of civilizations tended to repeat themselves over and over because the ISBs who created them became familiar with certain patterns and styles and stayed with them. It is a lot of work to invent an entire civilization complete with culture, architecture, language, customs, mathematics, moral values, and so forth. It is much easier to replicate a copy based on a familiar and successful pattern. A Sun Type 12 Class 7 planet is the designation given to a planet inhabited by carbon-oxygen-based life forms. The class of the planet is based on the size and radiation intensity of the star, the distance of the planetary orbit from the star, and the size, density, and gravity and chemical composition of the planet. Likewise, flora and fauna are designated and identified according to the star type and class of the planet they inhabit. On the average, the percentage of planets in the physical universe with a breathable atmosphere is relatively small. Most planets do not have an atmosphere upon which life forms feed, as on Earth, where the chemical composition of the atmosphere provides nutrition to plants and other organisms, which in turn support other life forms. When the domain force brought the Vedic hymns to the Himalayas region 8,200 years ago, some human societies already existed. The Aryan people invaded and conquered India, bringing the Vedic hymns to the area. The Vedas were learned by them, memorized, and carried forward verbally for 7,000 years before being committed to written form. During that span of time, one of the officers of the Domain Expeditionary Force was incarnated on Earth as a Vishnu. He is described many times in the Rig Veda. He is still considered to be a god by the Hindus. Vishnu fought in the religious wars against the old empire forces. He is a very able and aggressive Isbi, as well as a highly effective officer who has since been reassigned to other duties in the domain. This entire episode was orchestrated as an attack and revolt against the Egyptian pantheon installed by old empire administrators. The conflict was intended to help free humankind from implanted elements of the false civilization that focused attention on many gods and superstitious ritual worship demanded by the priests who managed them. It is all part of the mental manipulation by the old empire to hide their criminal actions against the Isbis on Earth. A priesthood, or prison guards, were used to help reinforce the idea that an individual is only a biological body and is not an immortal spiritual being. The individual has no identity. The individuals have no past lives. The individual has no power. Only the gods have power, and the gods are the contrivance of the priests who intercede between men and the gods they serve. Men are slaves to the dictates of the priests who threaten eternal spiritual punishment if men do not obey them. What else would one expect on a prison planet where all the prisoners have amnesia and the priests themselves are prisoners? The intervention of the domain force on Earth has not been entirely successful due to the secret mind control operation of the old empire that still continues to operate. A battle was waged between the old empire forces and the domain through religious conquest between 1500 BCE and about 1200 BCE. The domain forces attempted to teach the concept of an individual, immortal spiritual being to several influential beings on Earth. One such instance resulted in a very tragic misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and misapplication of the concept. The idea was perverted and applied to mean that there is only one Isbi instead of the truth that everyone is an Isbi. Obviously, this was a gross incomprehension and an utter unwillingness to take responsibility for one's own power. The old empire priests managed to corrupt the concept of the individual immortality into the idea that there is only one all-powerful Isbi and that no one else is or is allowed to be an Isbi. Obviously, this is the work of the old empire amnesia operation. It is easy to teach this altered notion to beings who do not want to be responsible for their own lives. Slaves are such beings. As long as one chooses to assign responsibility for creation, existence, and personal accountability for one's own thoughts and actions to others, one is a slave. As a result, the concept of a single monotheistic God resulted and was promoted by many self-proclaimed prophets, such as the Jewish slave leader Moses, who grew up in the household of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III, and his son Akhenaten, and his wife Nefertiti, as well as his son Tutankhamun. As a result, the concept of a single monotheistic God resulted and was promoted by many self-proclaimed prophets, such as the Jewish slave leader Moses, who grew up in the household of the pharaoh Amenhotep III, and his son Akhenaten, and his wife Nefertiti, as well as his son Tutankhamun. The attempt to teach certain beings on earth the truth that they are themselves Isbis was part of a plan to overthrow the fictional, metaphorical, anthropomorphic panoply of gods created by the old empire mystery cult called the Brothers of the Serpent, known in Egypt as the Priests of Amun. They were a very ancient secret society within the old empire. The pharaoh, Akhenaten, was not a very intelligent being and was heavily influenced by his personal ambition for self-glorification. He altered the concept of the individual spiritual being and embedded the concept in the sun god Aten. His pitiful existence was soon ended. He was assassinated by Maya and Paranefer, two of the priests of Amun, or Amen, which the Christians still say, who represented the interests of the old empire forces. The idea of one God was perpetuated by the Hebrew leader Moses while he was in Egypt. He left Egypt with his adopted people, the Jewish slaves. While they were crossing the desert, Moses was intercepted by an operative of the old empire near Mount Sinai. Moses was tricked into believing that this operative was the one God through the use of hypnotic commands, as well as technical and aesthetic tricks, which are commonly used by the old empire to trap Isbis. Thereafter, the Jewish slaves who trusted the world of Moses implicitly have worshipped a single God they call Yahweh. The name Yahweh means anonymous, as the Isbi who worked with Moses could not use an actual name or anything that would identify himself or blow the cover of the amnesia prison operation. The last thing the covert amnesia hypnosis prison system wants to do is reveal themselves openly to the Isbis on Earth. They feel that this would restore the inmates' memories. This is the reason that all traces of physical encounters between operatives of space civilizations and humans is very carefully hidden, disguised, covered up, denied, or misdirected. This old empire operative contacted Moses on a desert mountaintop and delivered the 10 hypnotic commands to him. These commands are very forcefully worded and compel the Isbi into utter subservience to the will of the operator. These hypnotic commands are still in effect and influence the thought patterns of millions of Isbis thousands of years later. Incidentally, we later discovered that the so-called Yahweh also wrote, programmed, and encoded the text of the Torah, which, when it is read literally or in its decoded form, will provide a great deal of more false information to those who read it. Ultimately, the Vedic hymns became the source of nearly all Eastern religions and were the philosophical source of the ideas common to Buddha, Laozi, Zoroaster, and other philosophers. The civilizing influences of these philosophies eventually replaced the brutal idolatry of the old empire religions and were the true genius of kindness and compassion. You asked me earlier why the domain and other space civilizations do not land on Earth or make their presence known. Land on Earth? Do you think we are crazy or want to be crazy? It takes a very brave Isbi to come down through the atmosphere and land on Earth because this is a prison planet with a very uncontrolled psychotic population. And no Isbi is entirely proof against the risk of entrapment, as with the members of the Domain Expeditionary Force who were captured in the Himalayas 8,200 years ago. No one knows what Isbis on Earth are going to do. We are not scheduled to invest the resources of the domain to take control of all the space surrounding the area at this time. This will occur in the not-too-distant future, about 5,000 Earth years, according to the time schedule of the domain. At this time, we do not prevent transports from other planetary systems or galaxies from continuing to drop Isbis into the amnesia force screen area. Eventually, this will change. In addition, Earth inherently is a highly unstable planet. It is not suitable for settlement or permanent habitation for any sustainable civilization. This is part of the reason why it is being used as a prison planet. No one else would seriously consider living here for a variety of simple and compelling reasons. One, the continental landmasses of Earth are floating on a sea of molten lava beneath the surface, which causes the landmasses to crack, crumble, and drift continually. Two, because of the liquid nature of the core, the planet is largely volcanic and subject to earthquakes and volcanic explosions. 3, the magnetic poles of the planet shift radically about once every 20,000 years. This causes a greater or lesser degree of devastation as a result of tidal waves and climate changes. 4, Earth is very distant from the center of the galaxy and from any other significant galactic civilization. This isolation makes it unsuitable for use except as a pit stop or jumping off point along the way between galaxies. The moon and asteroids are far more suitable for this purpose because they do not have any significant gravity. 5, Earth is a heavy gravity planet with heavy metallic soil and a dense atmosphere. This makes it treacherous for navigational purposes. The fact that I am in this room as a result of an in-flight accident, in spite of the technology of my craft and my extensive expertise as a pilot, are proof of these facts. 6, there are approximately 60 billion Earth-like Sun-type 12 Class 7 planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone, not to mention the vast expanses of the domain and the territories we claim in the future. It is difficult to stretch our resources to do much more than a periodic reconnaissance of Earth, especially when there are no immediate advantages to invest resources here. On Earth, most beings are not aware that they are Isbis or that there are spirits of any kind. Many other beings are aware of this, but nearly everyone has very limited understanding of themselves as an Isbi. One of the reasons for this is that Isbis have been waging war against each other since the beginning of time. The purpose of these wars has always been to establish domination by one Isbi or group of Isbis over another. Since an Isbi cannot be killed, the objective has been to capture and immobilize Isbis. This has been done in a nearly unlimited variety of ways. The most basic method to capture and immobilize an Isbi is through the use of various kinds of traps. Isbi traps have been made and put in place by many invading societies, such as the one that established the old empire beginning about 64 trillion years ago. Traps are often set up in the territory of the Isbis being attacked. Usually a trap is set up with the electronic wave of beauty to attract the interest and attention of the Isbi. When the Isbi moves toward the source of the aesthetic wave, such as a beautiful building or beautiful music, the trap is activated by the energy put out by the Isbi. One of the most common trap mechanisms uses the Isbi's own thought energy output when the Isbi tries to attack or fight back against the trap. The trap is activated and energized by the Isbi's own thought energy. The harder the Isbi fights against the trap, the more it pulls the Isbi toward it and keeps them stuck in the trap. Throughout the entire history of this physical universe, vast areas of space have been taken over and colonized by Isbi societies who invade and take over new areas of space in this fashion. In the past, these invasions have always shared common elements. 1. The overwhelming use of force of arms, usually with nuclear or electronic weapons. 2. Mind control of the Isbis in the invaded area through the use of electroshock, drugs, hypnosis, erasure of memory, and the implantation of false memory or false information intended to subjugate and enslave the local Isbi population. 3. Takeover of natural resources by the invading Isbis. 4. Political, economic, and social slavery of the local population. These activities continue in present time. All of the Isbis on Earth have been members of one or more of these activities in the past, both as an invader or as part of the population being invaded. There are no saints in this universe. Very few have avoided or been exempted from warfare between Isbis. Isbis on Earth are still the victims of this activity at this very moment. The between lives amnesia administered to Isbis is one of the mechanisms of an elaborate system of old world Isbi traps that prevent an Isbi from escaping. This operation is managed by an illicit renegade secret police force of the old empire using false provocation operations to disguise their activities in order to prevent detection by their own government, the domain, and by the victims of their activities. They are mind control methods developed by government psychiatrists. Earth is a ghetto planet. It is the result of an intergalactic holocaust. Isbis have been sentenced to Earth either because 1. They are too viciously insane or perverse to function as part of any civilization, no matter how degraded or corrupt. 2. or they may be a revolutionary threat to the social, economic, and political caste system that has been so carefully built and brutally enforced in the old empire. Biological bodies are specifically designed as the lowest order of the entity of the old empire caste system. When an Isby is sent to Earth and then tricked or coerced into operating in a biological body, they are actually in a prison inside a prison. 3. In an effort to permanently and irreversibly rid the old empire of such untouchables, the external identity, memory, and abilities of every Isby is forcefully erased. This final solution was conceived and carried out by the psychopathic criminals who are controlled by the old empire. The mass extermination of untouchables in prison camps created by Germany during World War II were recently revealed. Likewise, the Isbys of Earth are the victims of spiritual eradication and eternal slavery inside frail biological bodies inspired by the same kind of craven hatred in the old empire. The kind and creative inmates of Earth are continuously tortured by butchers and lunatics who are controlled by the old empire prison operators. The so-called civilizations of Earth, far from the age of useless pyramids to the age of nuclear holocaust, have been a colossal waste of natural resources, a perverted use of intelligence, and an overt oppression of the spiritual essence of every single Isby on the planet. If the domain sent ships to every corner of the universe in search of hell, their quest could end on Earth. What greater brutality can be inflicted on anyone than to erase the spiritual awareness, identity, ability, and memory that is in the essence of oneself? The domain has as yet been unable to rescue the 3,000 Isbys of the Expeditionary Force Battalion either. They are forced to inhabit biological bodies on Earth. We have been able to recognize and track most of them for the past 8,000 years. However, our attempts to communicate with them are usually futile, as they are unable to remember their true identity. The majority of lost members of the domain force have followed the general progression of Western civilization from India into the Middle East, then to Chaldea and Babylon, into Egypt, through Archaea, Greece, Rome, into Europe, to the Western Hemisphere, and then around the world. The members of the Lost Battalion and many other Isbys on Earth could be valuable citizens of the domain, not including those who are vicious criminals or perverts. Unfortunately, there has been no workable method conceived to emancipate the Isbys from Earth. Therefore, as a matter of common logic as well as the official policy of the domain, it is safer and more sensible to avoid contact with the Isby population of Earth until such time as the proper resources can be allocated to locate and destroy the old empire force screen and amnesia machinery and develop a therapy to restore the memory of an Isby. Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 9, A Timeline of Events. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, Personal Note. For this interview, I took written notes because Errol gave me a lot of dates and names that I couldn't possibly remember without writing them down. I didn't usually take notes, but during this lesson, I thought it was important to get the information exactly as she gave it to me. However, I discovered that my note-taking made it much more difficult for me to focus on receiving the communication from Errol. I was sometimes so distracted by my own writing that I lost the train of her thought, so I had to ask her to repeat herself several times. Errol continued to stay in communication with the communications officer on the asteroid belt station, from which she received much of this information. Since Errol was an officer, pilot, and engineer of the domain, and not a historian, she had to get this information from records of reconnaissance missions conducted by other officers of the domain expeditionary force. Official transcript of interview, top secret. The actual history of Earth is very bizarre. It's so nonsensical that it is incredible to anyone on Earth who attempts to investigate it. A myriad of vital information is missing from it. A huge conglomeration of non sequitur relics and mythology has been arbitrarily introduced into it. The volatile nature of the Earth itself cyclically covers, drowns, mixes, and shreds physical evidence. These factors, combined with amnesia, post-hypnotic suggestions, false facades, and cover manipulation, make a reconstruction of the factual origins and history of Earth civilizations virtually indecipherable. Any investigator, no matter how brilliant, is doomed to wallow in a quagmire of inconclusive assumptions, unworkable hypotheses, and perpetual mystery. Since the domain does not suffer these afflictions, having the advantage of memory, longevity, and an exterior point of view, I will add some clarification to your fragmentary knowledge of the history of Earth. These are some of the dates and events that are not mentioned in Earth history textbooks. These dates are significant because they provide some information concerning the influences of the old empire and of the domain on Earth. Although I have attended several briefings by our mission control personnel on the general background of the Earth within the past few hundred years, I will rely principally on data gathered from records captured after our invasion of the old empire planetary headquarters. Since that time, the Domain Expeditionary Force has tracked the general progress of events on Earth. As I mentioned, in some cases the domain has chosen to intervene in certain affairs on Earth in order to ensure the success of our long-term expansion plans. Although the domain has no interest in Earth per se, or the population of Isbys on this planet, it does serve our interests to ensure that the resources of Earth are not destroyed or spoiled. To that end, certain officers of the domain have been sent to Earth on reconnaissance missions from time to time to gather information. However, the following dates and events have been extrapolated from the accumulated information in the data files of the domain, at least those that are accessible to me through the Space Station Communications Center. 208,000 BCE. The establishment of the old empire, whose headquarters were located near one of the tail stars of the Ursa Major Big Dipper constellation of this galaxy. The old empire invasion force conquered the area with nuclear weapons sometime earlier. After the radioactivity subsided and the cleanup and restoration were completed, it received the immigration of beings from another galaxy into this galaxy. Those beings set up a society that kept going until about 10,000 years ago, when it was superseded by the domain. Very recently, Earth civilization has come to resemble aspects of that civilization now that it has fallen out of its immediate control. In particular, the appearance and technology of transportation such as planes, trains, ships, fire engines, and automobiles, as well as what you consider to be modern or futuristic architecture, which emulate the design of buildings in the major cities of the old empire. Before 75,000 BCE, the domain records contain very little information about the civilizations on the continental land masses of Atlanta and Lemur, except to note that they did coexist on Earth at more or less the same time. Apparently, both civilizations were founded by remnants of electronic space opera cultures who fled from their native planetary systems to escape political or religious persecution. The domain knows that a long-standing edict of the old empire prohibits unauthorized colonization of planets. Therefore, it is possible that their destruction was caused by police or military forces who pursued the colonists as criminals and destroyed them. Although this seems a likely supposition, no conclusive evidence exists that explains the complete destruction and disappearance of two entire electronic civilizations. Another possibility is that a massive submarine volcanic eruption in the region of Lake Toba in Sumatra and Mount Krakatoa in Java caused the destruction of Lemur. The floodwaters caused by the eruption overwhelmed all the land masses, including the highest mountains. Survivors of the destruction of the civilization, the Lemurians, are the earliest ancestors of the Chinese. Australia and the ocean areas to the north were the center of the Lemurian civilization and are the source of the Oriental races. Both civilizations possessed electronics, flight, and similar technologies of space opera cultures. Apparently, the volcanic eruption expelled such a significant mass of molten rock that the resulting vacuum beneath the crust of Earth caused great areas of the land masses to sink below the oceans. The continental areas occupied by both civilizations were covered with volcanic matter and then submerged, leaving very little evidence that they ever existed except for legends of a global flood which prevail in every culture of the earth, and for survivors who are the genus of the Oriental races and cultures. That kind of colossal volcanic explosion fills the stratosphere with toxic gases which are carried around the whole planet. The usual refuse of these volcanic eruptions can easily cause a rain that lasts 40 days and 40 nights due to atmospheric pollution, as well as an extensive period during which radiation from the sun is deflected back into space and causes global cooling. Certainly, such an event would cause an ice age, extinctions of life forms, and many other relatively long-term changes lasting thousands of years. Due to the myriad types of naturally occurring global cataclysmic events which are indigenous to Earth, it is not a suitable planet for habitation by ISBs. In addition, there have been occasional global cataclysms caused by ISBs, such as the one that destroyed the dinosaurs more than 70 million years ago. That destruction was caused by an intergalactic warfare, during which time Earth and many other neighboring moons and planets were bombarded by atomic weapons. Atomic explosions cause atmospheric fallout much like that of volcanic eruptions. Most of the planets in this sector of the galaxy have been uninhabitable deserts since then. Earth is undesirable for many other reasons: heavy gravity and dense atmosphere, floods, earthquakes, volcanoes, polar shifts, continental drift, meteor impacts, atmospheric and climatic changes, to name a few. What kind of lasting civilization could any sophisticated culture propose to develop in such an environment? In addition, Earth is a small planet of a rim star of a galaxy. This makes Earth very isolated geographically from the more concentrated planetary civilizations which exist toward the center of the galaxy. These obvious facts have made Earth suitable for use only as a zoological or botanical garden, or for its current use as a prison, but not much else. Before 30,000 years BCE, Earth started being used as a dumping ground and prison for ISBs who were judged untouchable, meaning criminal or nonconformists. ISBs were captured, encapsulated in electronic traps, and transported to Earth from various parts of the old empire. Underground amnesia stations were set up on Mars and on Earth in the Rwenzori Mountains in Africa, in the Pyrenees Mountains of Portugal, and in steppes of Mongolia. These electronic monitoring points create force screens designed to detect and capture ISBs when the ISB departs the body at death. ISBs are brainwashed using extreme electronic force in order to maintain Earth's population in a state of perpetual amnesia. Further population controls are installed through the use of long-range electronic thought control mechanisms. These stations are still in operation, and they are extremely difficult to attack or destroy, even for the domain, which will not maintain a significant military force in this area until a later date. The pyramid civilizations were intentionally created as a part of the ISB prison system on Earth. The pyramid is alleged to be the symbol for wisdom. However, the wisdom of the old empire on planet Earth is intended to operate as part of the elaborate amnesia trap consisting of mass, meaning, and mystery. These are opposite to the qualities of an immortal spiritual being, which has no mass or meaning. An ISB is solely because it thinks that it is. Mass represents the physical universe, including objects such as stars, planets, gases, liquids, energy particles, and teacups. The pyramids were very, very solid objects, as were all the structures created by the old empire. Heavy, massive, dense, solid objects create the illusion of eternity. Dead bodies wrapped in linen, soaked in resin, placed inside engraved golden coffins, and entombed with earthly possessions amid cryptic symbols create an illusion of eternal life. However, dense, heavy physical universe symbols are the exact opposite of an ISB. An ISB has no mass or time. Objects do not endure forever. An ISB is forever. Meaning. False meanings prevent knowledge of the truth. The pyramid cultures of Earth are a fabricated illusion. They are nothing more than false civilizations contrived by the old empire, mystery cult, called the Brothers of the Serpent. False meanings were invented to create the illusion of a false society to further reinforce the amnesia mechanism among the inmates in the Earth prison system. Mystery is built of lies and half-truths. Lies cause persistence because they alter facts which are comprised of exact dates, places, and events. When truth is known, a lie no longer persists. If the exact truth is revealed, it is no longer a mystery. All of the pyramid civilizations of Earth were carefully contrived of layer upon layer of lies skillfully combined with a few truths. The priest cult of the old empire combines sophisticated mathematics and space opera technology with their theatrical metaphors and symbolism. All of these are complete fabrications of truth baited with the allure of aesthetics and mystery. The intricate rituals, astronomical alignments, secret rites, massive monuments, marvelous architecture, artistically rendered hieroglyphs, and man-animal gods were designed to create an unsolvable mystery for the ISB prison population on Earth. The mystery diverts attention away from the truth that ISBs have been captured, given amnesia, and imprisoned on a planet far, far away from their home. The truth is that every single ISB on Earth came to Earth from some other planetary system. Not one person on Earth is a native inhabitant. Human beings did not evolve on Earth. In the past, Egyptian society was run by the prison administrators or priests, who in turn manipulated a pharaoh, controlled the treasury, and kept the inmate population enslaved physically and spiritually. In modern times, the priests have changed, but the function is the same. However, now the priests are prisoners too. Mystery reinforces the walls of the prison. The old empire feared that the ISBs on Earth might regain their memory. Therefore, one of the primary functions of the old empire priesthood is to prevent ISBs on Earth from remembering who they really are, how they came to Earth, where they came from. The old empire operators of the prison system and their superiors do not want ISBs to remember who murdered them, captured them, stole all of their possessions, sent them to Earth, gave them amnesia, and condemned them to eternal imprisonment. Imagine what would happen if all the inmates in the prison suddenly remembered that they have the right to be free. What if they suddenly realize that they have been falsely imprisoned and rise up as one against the guards? They are afraid to reveal anything that looks like the civilization of the inmates' home planets. A body, a piece of clothing, a symbol, a spaceship, an advanced electronics device, or any other remnant of civilization from a home planet could remind a being and rekindle his memory. Sophisticated technologies of entrapment and enslavement, which were developed over millions of years in the old empire, have been applied to the ISBs on Earth with the intention to create a false facade for the prison. These facades were installed on Earth in totality all at once. Every piece is a fully integrated part of the prison system. This includes a religion of mumbo-jumbo doublespeak. Every pyramid civilization uses this as part of a control mechanism to keep the population enslaved by force, by fear, and by ignorance. This includes a religion of mumbo-jumbo doublespeak. Every pyramid civilization uses this as part of a control mechanism to keep the population enslaved by force, by fear, and by ignorance. The indecipherable muddle of irrelevant information, geometric designs, mathematical calculation, astronomical alignments are part of the false spirituality based on solid objects rather than immortal spirits, in order to confuse and disorient the ISBs on Earth. When the body of a person died, they were buried with their earthly possessions, including their former body wrapped in linen, to sustain their soul, or ka, after death. An ISB does not have a soul. An ISB is a soul. On the home planet of an ISB, their material possessions were not lost, stolen, or forgotten when the being died or left the body. An ISB could return and claim the possessions. However, if the ISB has amnesia, they will not remember that they had any possession. So governments, insurance companies, bankers, family members, and other vultures can pick their possessions clean without fear of retribution from the deceased. The only reason for these false meanings is to instill the idea that an ISB is not a spirit but a physical object. This is a lie. This is a trap for an ISB. Countless people have spent endless hours attempting to solve the jigsaw puzzle of Egypt and other old empire civilizations. They are puzzles made of pieces that do not fit. A question states its own answer. What is the mystery of Egypt and other pyramid cultures? Mystery. Circa 15,000 BCE, The old Empire forces supervised the construction of hydraulic mining operations in the Andes Mountains in present-day Bolivia near Lake Titicaca, Lake of 10 Stones, at Tijuanaco, including construction of the massive stone complex of carved stone buildings known as Calasasaya and its Gate of the Sun at the elevation of nearly 14,000 feet, 11,600 BCE. The polar axis of Earth shifted. The polar axis of Earth shifted to a sea area. The last ice age came to an end abruptly as the polar ice caps melted and the level of the ocean rose to submerge large sections of the land masses of Earth. The last remaining vestiges of Atlantis and Lemuria were covered by water. Massive extinctions of animals occurred in the Americas, Australia, and the Arctic regions due to the shift of the poles. 10,450 BCE. Plans were made by the old Empire Isbi called Thoth for construction of a great pyramid of Giza. The 4 air shafts of the pyramid point precisely to key stars in the old Empire as seen from Giza this year. The alignment of the pyramids of Giza on the ground matches perfectly the alignment of the constellation of Orion as seen in the sky from Giza relative to the Nile as the earthly representation of the Milky Way in the sky. 10,400 BCE. According to the Earth historian Herodotus records from the ruined civilizations of Atlantis, containing electronic technology and other technology of that society, were buried in a vault beneath the paws of the Sphinx. The Greek historian wrote that he was told about this by some of his friends who were priests of Anu, the Sumerian god, at the Egyptian city of Heliopolis. However, it is highly unlikely that any traces of an electronic civilization would be allowed to be left intact on Earth by the old Empire prison system administrators. 8,212 BCE. The Veda or Vedic hymns are a set of religious hymns that were introduced to the societies of Earth. They came forward in spoken tradition, memorized from generation to generation. The hymn to the dawn child includes an idea called the cycle of the physical universe, the creation, growth, conservation, decay, and death, or destruction of energy and matter in a space. These cycles produce time. The same set of hymns describes the theory of evolution. Here is a tremendous body of knowledge which contains a great deal of spiritual truth. Unfortunately, it has been incorrectly evaluated by humans and altered with lies and reversals of fact by priests, which are a booby trap to prevent anyone from using the wisdom to discover a way to escape from the prison planet. 8050 BCE. Destruction of the old Empire home planet government in this galaxy. This was the end of the old Empire as a political entity in the galaxy. However, the vast size of the old Empire will take many thousands of years for the domain to conquer completely. The inertia of the political, economic, and cultural systems of the old Empire will remain in place for some time to come. However, remnants of the old Empire space fleet in the solar system of Earth were finally destroyed in 1230 AD. In addition to operatives of the old Empire who run the Earth prison operation, there were other beings from the old Empire who came to Earth. Since Earth was no longer under the control of the old Empire, after their defeat by the domain forces, there was no police force to control military renegades, space pirates, miners, merchants, and entrepreneurs who came to Earth to exploit the resources of the planet for personal gain and many other nefarious reasons. For example, the history of the earth according to the Jewish people describes the Nephilim. Chapter 6 of the book of Genesis describes the origin of Nephilim. Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves whomever they choose. The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The ancient Jewish people who wrote the history book called the Old Testament were slaves, herders, and gatherers. Any modern technology, even a simple flashlight, would seem astounding and miraculous to them. They attributed any unexplainable phenomenon to technology of the workings of a god. Unfortunately, this behavior is universal among all Isbis who have been given amnesia and cannot remember their own experiences, training, technology, personality, or identity. Obviously, if these were men and they mated with Earth women, they were not sons of God. They were Isbis who inhabited biological bodies in order to take advantage of the political situation in the old empire, or simply to indulge in physical sensation. They set up small colonies of their own on Earth beyond the reach of the police and tax authorities. Coincidentally, one of the most serious crimes an Isbi could commit in the old empire was to violate income tax regulations. Income taxes were used as a slavery mechanism and a punishment in the old empire. The slightest error in a tax report made an Isbi untouchable, followed by imprisonment on Earth. 6750 BCE. Other pyramid civilizations were set up by the old empire on Earth. These were established in Babylon, Egypt, China, and Mesoamerica. The Mesopotamian area provided service facilities, communication stations, spaceports, and stone quarry operations for these false civilizations. Ptah was the name given to the first in a succession of administrators from the old empire who represented themselves to Earth population as divine rulers. Ptah's importance may be understood when one learns that the word Egypt is a Greek corruption of the phrase Het-Ka Ptah, or House of the Spirit of Ptah. Ptah was nicknamed the Developer. He was a construction engineer. His high priest was given the title Great Leader of Craftsmen. Ptah was also the god of reincarnation in Egypt. He originated the opening of the mouth ceremony, which was performed by priests at funerals to release souls from their corpses. Of course, when the souls were released, they were captured, given amnesia, and returned to Earth again. The so-called divine rulers who followed Ptah on Earth were called Neter, meaning guardians or watchers by the Egyptians. Their symbol was the serpent, or dragon, which represented a secret priesthood of the old empire called the Brothers of the Serpent. Old empire engineers used cutting tools of highly concentrated light waves to quickly carve and excavate stone blocks. They also used force fields and spacecraft to lift and transport blocks of stone weighing hundreds or thousands of tons each. The placement on the ground of some of these structures will be found to have geodesic or astronomical significance relative to various stars in this galactic region. The buildings are crude and impractical compared to building standards on most planets. As an engineer of the domain, I can attest that makeshift structures like these would never pass inspection on a planet in the domain. Stone blocks such as those used in pyramid civilizations can still be seen, partially excavated in the stone quarries in the Middle East and elsewhere. Most of the structures were hastily built props, much like the false facades of the Western town on a set of a motion picture. They appear to be real and to have some use or value. However, they have no value. They have no useful purpose. The pyramids and all of the other stone monuments erected by the old empire could be called mystery monuments. For what reason would anyone waste so many resources to construct so many useless buildings, to create a mysterious illusion? The fact of the matter is that each one of the divine rulers were Isbis who served as operatives of the old empire. They were certainly not divine, although they were Isbis. 6248 BCE. The beginning of active warfare between the Domain Space Command and the surviving remnants of the old Empire space fleet in this solar system that lasted nearly 7,500 years. It began when an installation was established in the Himalaya Mountains by a battalion of the 3,000 officers and crew members of the Domain Expeditionary Force. The installation was not fortified, as the Domain was not aware that the old Empire maintained Earth as a prison planet. The Domain installation was attacked and destroyed by space forces of the old Empire, who continued to operate in the solar system of Earth. Isbis of the Domain battalion were captured, taken to Mars, given amnesia, and sent back to Earth to inhabit human biological bodies. They are still on Earth. 5965 BCE. Investigations into the disappearance of Domain forces in this solar system led to the discovery of old Empire bases on Mars and elsewhere. The Domain took over the planet Venus as a defensive position against the space forces of the old Empire. The Domain Expeditionary Force also monitors life forms on Venus, which has a very dense, hot, heavy atmosphere of sulfuric acid clouds. There are few life forms on Earth that can endure an atmospheric environment like Venus. The domain also established secret installations or space stations in the Earth's solar system. This solar system has a planet that is broken up, the asteroid belt. It provides a very useful low-gravity platform for takeoff and landing of spacecraft. It is used as a galactic jump between the Milky Way and adjoining galaxies. There aren't any planets at this end of the galaxy that can serve as a good galactic entering spot for incoming transport and other ships. But this broken-up planet makes a very ideal space station. As a result of our war against the old empire, this area of the solar system is now a valuable possession of the domain. 3450 to 3100 BCE. The intervention into the affairs of Earth by the old empire operatives, or divine gods, was disrupted at this time by the domain forces. They were forced to replace themselves with human rulers. The first dynasty of human pharaohs, who united Upper and Lower Egypt, began with the rule of a pharaoh who coincidentally was named Men. He established the capital city called Men-Nefer, the beauty of men, in Egypt. This started the first succession of 10 human pharaohs and a period of 350 years of chaos that followed in the administrative ranks of the old empire. 3200 BCE. As I mentioned earlier, Earth was under attack between the domain and the old empire forces during this period. Of course, this does not make any sense to archaeologists or historians on Earth because the Egyptian period is a space opera era period. Since
Shout out to the LeakYou community. Please join us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
Please hit the like. Thank you.
Looks like you lost another one.
All right, guys, listen. So I'm going to cut it here. As we've been listening in on this book that some would classify as fiction. One can only wonder. I will see you all when I see you. Until next time.
The judgment sentence that you are an asshole. The trial is over. Thank you, everybody.
Let's play a game. You have 10 seconds to take all your stuff and get out of my life. 10, 9, 8.
God bless you, motherfucker.
You're really smart. Like really, really, really smart like I am.